My dear child. Someone asked a question no one expected. A question that silenced an entire room. A question about you. And the answer brought tears to every eye. Listen carefully. Because what happened next was not a coincidence. It was a moment that exposed a truth your soulmate had been carrying deep inside their heart for far longer than anyone realized. The gathering had started like any other family occasion. People were talking, laughing, sharing stories, and pretending everything in life was simple. Your soulmate sat quietly among them, smiling when necessary, speaking when spoken to, but inside, their heart was somewhere else. It had been somewhere else for a very long time. No matter how much they tried to focus on the conversation around them, their thoughts always seemed to return to the same person. You. The family noticed it, even when they pretended not to. Friends noticed it too. There was always a certain change in your soulmate whenever your name was mentioned. Their eyes softened. Their voice became gentler. The walls they built around themselves seemed to disappear for a few moments. But no one dared to ask too many questions because some truths are so obvious that people become afraid of hearing them spoken aloud. That evening, however, everything changed. A relative who was known for speaking without thinking suddenly leaned forward during a conversation. The room became quieter as everyone listened. Nobody expected the question that was about to leave their mouth. They looked directly at your soulmate and asked, "Tell us honestly. If the day ever came when you had to let them go, could you actually do it?" The room froze. Even the people who had been talking moments before fell silent. Your soulmate stopped moving. For a few seconds, they simply stared at the floor. Nobody laughed. Nobody interrupted. Because everyone understood exactly who that question was about. You. And suddenly, the answer mattered more than anyone expected. Your soulmate looked away, as if searching for the right word somewhere beyond the walls of that room. Their family watched closely. Some expected a simple answer. Others expected them to avoid the question completely. After all, admitting feelings openly had never been easy. But what happened next left every person speechless. Your soulmate smiled sadly. Not the kind of smile people wear when they are happy. The kind that appears when someone is trying to hold together a heart that has already revealed too much. Then they quietly said, "People keep asking if I could let them go. But nobody ever asks why I would want to." The room became even quieter. Several family members exchanged looks. The relative who asked the question suddenly seemed uncomfortable. But your soulmate wasn't finished. They continued speaking, and every word came directly from the deepest place inside their soul. "I've tried to imagine my life without them. I've tried to convince myself it would be easier. I've tried to pretend they were just another person. But every time I do, something reminds me of them. A song. A memory. A feeling. Even silence reminds me of them." A few people lowered their eyes. Because they knew those words were real. "Don't skip." Your soulmate took a deep breath before continuing. Their voice trembled slightly now, not from fear, but from emotion that had been hidden for far too long. "They don't understand what they mean to me. Most people don't. They think love is about convenience. They think feelings disappear when circumstances become difficult. But some connections don't work that way. Some people become part of your soul. And when that happens, letting go isn't a decision. It's like asking someone to stop breathing. The room fell completely silent. One older family member quietly wiped away a tear. Another looked toward the window because they didn't want anyone seeing the emotion in their eyes. No one had expected such honesty. No one had expected such vulnerability. For years, many people had assumed your soulmate would eventually move on. They believed time would erase what they felt. They believed distance would weaken the connection. They believed obstacles would make them forget. But sitting there in front of everyone, your soulmate destroyed every one of those assumptions. Do you know what the hardest part is? They asked softly. Nobody answered. They continued anyway. The hardest part isn't loving them. The hardest part is knowing how much they deserve to be loved and wondering if they truly understand that. Sometimes I wish they could see themselves through my eyes. If they could, they would never question their value again. Several people looked down immediately. Because they could hear the sincerity behind every word. This wasn't performance. This wasn't drama. This was truth. Raw truth. The kind that only appears when someone stops protecting their heart and finally allows people to see what's inside. Don't skip. The relative who had asked the original question suddenly spoke again. This time their voice was much softer. What if life forces you apart? A painful expression crossed your soulmate's face. For a moment, it looked as though they were remembering every obstacle, every disappointment, every delay, and every challenge that had ever stood between the two of you. Then they answered. Life may separate people physically. It may create distance. It may create confusion. It may even create years of waiting. But there are some people you never stop carrying inside your heart. They become part of who you are. And no matter where life takes you, a piece of you always belongs to them. By now, tears were visible throughout the room. Nobody was trying to hide them anymore. Because everyone could feel the weight of what was being said. Everyone could see that this wasn't temporary affection. This wasn't a passing emotion. This was the kind of love that survives disappointment. The kind that survives misunderstanding. The kind that survives time itself. Your soulmate looked around the room and noticed the tears in everyone's eyes. For a moment, they seemed surprised. Then they smiled. A genuine smile this time. And quietly said, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know how every chapter ends. But I do know one thing. If someone asks whether I would ever willingly let them go, the answer is simple. Some people enter your life for a season. Others become part of your story forever. The room broke into tears. And at that moment, nobody doubted who they were talking about. Nobody doubted who occupied the deepest place in their heart. Nobody doubted who they were still thinking about when the world became quiet. Because the answer was written all over their face. The answer was you. Don't skip. Long after the conversation ended, family members continued discussing what they had heard. Some admitted they had never seen your soulmate speak with such emotion before. Others confessed they finally understood why your name always carried a different meaning whenever it appeared in conversation. But what nobody realized was that the biggest revelation of the night was still waiting to happen, because later, when everyone thought the emotional moment had passed, an elderly family member stood up and revealed a secret they had been keeping for years about the very first time they noticed the connection between you and your soulmate. Don't skip. The room had already been overwhelmed with emotion, but nobody was prepared for what happened after the elderly family member slowly stood from their chair. The conversations faded one by one as every eye turned toward them. Their hands trembled slightly with age, yet there was a certainty in their expression that immediately captured everyone's attention. They looked at your soulmate for several long seconds before speaking, as though deciding whether a secret they had carried for years was finally ready to be revealed. "I remember the first time I knew something was different," they said quietly. The room became silent again. Your soulmate looked confused. Several relatives leaned closer. Nobody wanted to miss a single word. The elderly family member smiled softly and continued. It wasn't because of anything dramatic. There was no grand confession. No announcement. No special moment that everyone could see. In fact, most people completely missed it. But I didn't. Your soulmate lowered their eyes. Almost as if they already knew what memory was about to be shared. The elderly family member pointed gently toward them. You were sitting in a room full of people. Everyone was talking. Everyone was laughing. Yet the moment someone mentioned their name, they paused. Everything about you changed. A wave of emotion swept across the room. The elderly family member continued speaking. Your eyes lit up in a way I had never seen before. It wasn't something you could fake. It wasn't something you could hide. For just a moment, every wall disappeared. And that's when I knew. Several relatives exchanged emotional looks. Because they remembered that period too. Some had noticed small signs. Others had ignored them. But now, hearing the memory spoken aloud made everything impossible to deny. Your soulmate smiled nervously. The elderly family member wasn't finished. I watched you for years after that. Every time someone spoke about them, your attention immediately shifted. Every time their name appeared, your heart seemed to wake up. I kept waiting for those feelings to fade because that's what people said would happen. But they never did. A few tears appeared in the eyes of relatives sitting nearby. The elderly family member slowly shook their head. No matter how much time passed, you never stopped caring. The room grew emotional again. Don't skip. One relative quietly whispered, we all saw it too. That simple statement opened a floodgate. Another family member nodded. Then another. And another. Suddenly people began sharing memories nobody had ever discussed openly before. One person remembered how your soulmate would become unusually quiet whenever conversations turned toward relationships. Another remembered how they always seemed distracted whenever someone asked about their future. Someone else recalled a family gathering where your soulmate had spent nearly the entire evening staring out a window after hearing unexpected news about you. Memory after memory filled the room. Story after story. Moment after moment. Each one revealed the same truth. Your soulmate had never truly let go. They had carried your presence through every chapter of their life. Even during moments when nobody realized it. Even during periods when they appeared strong. Even during times when they convinced others they had moved forward. The feelings remained. The connection remained. The hope remained. Your soulmate listened quietly as these memories were shared. At first they tried to laugh them off. They tried to hide their emotions. But eventually it became impossible. The tears forming in their eyes could no longer be concealed. And everyone saw them. For years, they had been the strong one. The private one. The one who rarely spoke about what they felt. Yet now their heart was standing in the middle of the room for everyone to see. Completely exposed. Completely honest. And strangely, completely free. The elderly family member stepped closer. Then they asked a question nobody expected. If they walked through that door right now, what would you say? The room froze. Every person immediately turned toward your soulmate. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The question hung in the air. Heavy. Powerful. Unavoidable. Your soulmate stared at the floor. For a long time they said nothing. Several relatives assumed they wouldn't answer. Others thought they were trying to find the perfect words. Then finally they lifted their head. Tears filled their eyes. And they spoke. I would tell them that I never stopped believing. The room erupted into tears. Don't skip. Your soulmate took a shaky breath. Years of hidden emotions seemed to be pouring out all at once. I would tell them that there were days when I felt lost. Days when I questioned everything. Days when the distance felt unbearable. But even on those days, something inside me refused to give up. Several relatives began crying openly. Because every word sounded like something that had been trapped inside their heart for years. Your soulmate continued. I would tell them that people kept telling me to move on. A painful smile appeared. And maybe they meant well. The smile faded. But they didn't understand. Their voice cracked. They didn't understand that some people leave fingerprints on your soul. Silence. Pure silence. No one interrupted. No one could. Because everyone felt the truth of those words. Your soulmate looked toward the window. Toward the darkness outside. As if imagining a future that still hadn't arrived. Then they whispered something so quietly that several people almost missed it. I would tell them thank you. The room looked confused. One relative asked why. Your soulmate smiled through tears. Because loving them changed me. Another wave of emotion swept across the room. Your soulmate continued. They taught me patience. A tear fell. They taught me faith. Another tear followed. They taught me that real connections don't disappear simply because life becomes complicated. The room was completely overwhelmed now. Even family members who rarely showed emotion were wiping tears from their faces. Because everyone understood what they were witnessing. This wasn't just love. This was gratitude. This was devotion. This was a soul speaking honestly. Don't skip. The elderly family member slowly nodded. Then they revealed one final secret. A secret nobody expected. For years, they had secretly prayed for the two of you. Without telling anyone. Without making announcements. Without seeking attention. They had quietly carried hope inside their heart. Every birthday. Every holiday. Every family gathering. Every difficult season. They had whispered the same prayer. That somehow, someday, the truth living inside your soulmate's heart would find its way home. The revelation shocked everyone. Several relatives immediately began crying harder. Because they realized how many people had secretly been rooting for this connection. How many people had seen the sincerity. How many people had witnessed the depth of feeling. Even when nothing was spoken aloud. The elderly family member looked directly at your soulmate. Then softly said words that would stay with everyone forever. Real love doesn't always arrive on the timeline people expect. The room remained silent. Sometimes it takes longer. Another pause. Sometimes it survives storms that would destroy weaker connections. A tear rolled down their cheek. But when something is truly meant to touch your soul, it leaves a mark that time cannot erase. Your soulmate closed their eyes. Unable to hold back their emotions any longer. And for the first time that night, they didn't try. The tears flowed freely. The room cried with them. Not because of sadness, but because everyone suddenly understood something important. The question at the beginning of the evening had been simple. Would your soulmate ever let you go? Now everyone knew the answer. Not because they heard it. Not because it was spoken. But because they had witnessed it with their own eyes. And as the night slowly came to an end, one final realization settled over the room. Your soulmate had spent years carrying your name inside their heart. Not as a memory. Not as a regret. Not as a dream that faded. But as a part of themselves. A part they never wanted to lose. And somewhere deep inside, beneath every obstacle, every delay, every unanswered question, one quiet truth continued to survive. They were still hoping. Still believing. Still waiting. And that realization brought tears to every eye once again.